So welcome everyone. Good to see you all. So excited. Really excited. I saw Karen earlier.
Hi, it's been so long.
All right. Welcome to Seattle Atheist Church. Atheists, agnostics, skeptics, free thinkers, questioning, and even believers, whatever you like to call yourself, you are welcome here. At the Seattle Atheist Church, we call ourselves an atheist church because you will never hear anything supernatural promoted from the podium. The coronavirus has affected us all, and we hope everyone is doing well. The safety and well-being of our members is extremely important to us, and so we are grateful that you are joining us remotely today. Now on to our creed. Seattle Atheist Church was founded on the principles of scientific naturalism and secular ethics, which commits us, on the one hand, to reason and evidence-based thinking, and on the other, to compassion for fellow human beings. These commitments motivate us to oppose magical and wishful thinking and all forms of dogma, as well as to stand firmly against all forms of prejudice. Truth claims are attempted here, and we stand ready to revise our thinking in light of new information. We attempt to be excellent to all conscious beings, and we believe in good, because good works in non-mysterious ways. If that sounds right to you, then you are probably in the right place. Okay, so today we have a guest speaker though, and this is Jennifer Hancock from Humanist Learning Systems. Is going to talk to us today about how to deal with bullies using reason, compassion, and science. Jennifer, I'm going to hand the microphone over to you.
Sure. Thank you everyone for inviting me to join you today to talk about this. My background real quick is I'm a third generation free thinker on both sides of my family, which makes me a little unusual in America. I was the executive director for the Humanist of Florida. I am currently on the board for the Center for Free Thought Equality and on the board of the USA chapter of the International Humanistic Management Association. And in addition to the company I have, Humanist Learning Systems. I am a humanist. That is my primary identification. I'm also an atheist, but what people talk to me about and want to learn from me about is the philosophy of humanism, and that's what I teach. And my online programs, include everything from personal development, like how would you actually live as a humanist? How do you make decisions? To professional development programs. I also have contracts with like the EEO on continuing education for the counselors and the investigators, and also if you're ordered to have EEO training, that's kind of what I do. So let me switch over and start sharing my screen so that you can see my slides. Can you still see me, or did I? Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah. All right. So, because I've lost the, I don't know where you guys are. Anyways, I'll just talk because I don't seem to have any other. Okay. So how do you stop bullies with dignity, compassion, and science? The reason I started working on this is my first book was actually The Humanist Approach to Happiness. And as soon as I published it, people started asking me about bullying because I have a background as an animal trainer. I used to train dolphins in college, and I also, got my degree in cognitive linguistics. So I had quite a number of psychology classes as well. And I actually know how to train to make unwanted behavior stop. Like, how do you train unwanted behavior to stop? That's something I know how to do and was apprenticed in because of my background training dolphins. And then also I'm a humanist and I have this background in cognitive psychology and cognitive linguistics. So that's kind of how it all came together. As soon as I started getting some traction on the book, people started saying, well, how do we use some of the stuff that's in the book to specifically deal with the bullying project? the bullying problem. So the challenge is, how do we deal with bullies, get them to stop while living our values with dignity and compassion, and then of course using science to do that. And so that's what I teach, and when I'm teaching EEO officers, that's also what I'm teaching them. My thought on this was that if we're gonna, like, imagine if you had a whole school where none of the kids were ever bullied, because the kids were taught how to make bullying stop with dignity and compassion. And so no one was ever bullied. And the kids that might have experimented with bullying learn it doesn't work and grow up and use their leadership skills in more pro-social ways. What are those kids like when they graduate and enter society? How do they change society? Now, like, move that to an entire county or entire state or entire country. And the challenge becomes, well, how do we get this knowledge into the hands of parents? Because parents are really the ones that have to teach this to their kids, because it requires reinforcement and kind of apprenticeship over time. When, as the kid has problems, the parent needs to help them, remind them of these skills and how to use them in the novel situations they're encountering. Well, the parents are in the workplace being subjected to sexual harassment training that teaches them it's illegal, don't do that. And my thought is, what if we changed that training and made it, well, yes, it's illegal, don't do that, but if it's happening to you, here's what you should do, and provide the science. And so that's why I created my company and published the book. So let's talk about kind of the science and also the concept of dignity. What makes a bullying tick? Well, bullies have their own problem. They're full human beings, right? They're not ogres, they're not caricatures, they're human beings. And they're responding to the stimuluses around them in the best way that they can. And maybe they were taught to be aggressive. Maybe they experimented with aggression and found that they can get their friends to do what they want if they're kind of mean. But often bullies have their own problems, and the victims, they think what's going on is about them, but it's really about the bully and what the bully has going on and what the bullying is responding to. Several years ago, someone did a study where they had writers go back and contact their childhood bully. And almost none of those bullies remembered bullying this person. In fact, they actually said, I really liked you. You were one of the only people who was nice to me. And this kind of shocked the writers, because this person bullied them and made their life miserable. But that's not what the bully had going on. The bullying has their own problems. And if we're going to respond to them with dignity, which we actually need to do in order to do the science, and that's why I'm talking about this, in order to do what the science says we need to do, you do have to be in the frame of mind that you're not punishing the bully, and that requires you to respond with dignity. And the nice thing about that is it's consistent with our values. So don't assume you know what a bully has going on and is dealing with, because you don't. And you should be feeling, instead of feeling afraid of a bully, we should be teaching kids to feel compassion for them. That doesn't mean we allow the bully to do what they're doing, but here's what happens when you encourage a child to think about the bully not as a predator to them, but as a fellow kid who's dealing with stuff and is acting out and throwing a tantrum, basically. Well, it creates this feeling of compassion. It acts as a shield. And so this image is from the cover of my book. And that the little girl with the multicolored striped socks, she's got this force field of compassion around her. As soon as she starts thinking about the bully with compassion, she's no longer thinking about her own fears and her own anxieties and her own problems. And those feelings largely actually go away when you invoke your dignity and compassion. And that's why you do it. I assure you, bullies are not going to want you to be compassionate with them. This is something that we should teach people to do for themselves, because it helps them get through whatever it is without it being about them.
It's interrupt. I just wanted to, we're not seeing your slides right now. So
okay. Let me see, because I didn't, oh, here we go, because I'm not sharing. That's what was happening. Okay.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I was trying to figure out why it didn't look right and I couldn't figure it out. So there you go. Thank you. All right. So as I was saying, girl with the multicolored striped socks, she has a force field of compassion around her. And this really does work. And, you know, I ask kids all the time when they're resisting this, like, would you rather feel afraid of this person or would you rather feel sorry for this person? And everybody's going to say, well, I'd rather feel sorry for them. Right. And this does, again, this doesn't mean that you allow them to do whatever they're doing. It means that how you're thinking about what's going on is going to be fundamentally shifted. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not doing anything wrong. The problem is this other person is not behaving right. And that's the problem. And you don't know why they're not behaving right. And if your kid, it's well beyond your pay grade to diagnose what's wrong with this kid that's bullying. But the act of feeling compassion for them helps you immediately feel less hurt. And it's no longer about you, it's about them. And that's a much better mind frame to be in. So the next question is, how do we get to that compassion? And whenever I give trainings on this, you know, the hardest part is compassion. And anybody who's tried to actively practice compassion will tell you that. But there also seems to be kind of a divide between the men and the women in my audience. It's always a guy who raises their hand and says, well, the way you deal with a bully is you punch them and then they never bother you again. All right. And yeah, okay, fine. But I would say if it gets to the point that you guys are physically fighting, then it's gone on too long. And it would have been nicer if this was dealt with well before it got to the point that, you know, physical violence was required. So let's talk about what compassion is. This is central to the practice of the philosophy of humanism, right? It's like core value number one. And as I mentioned before, forgiveness is not something you're doing for them. And I think that's what a lot of people hangs them up on this, that they don't want to do it. They think if they feel compassion for the other person or if they forgive the other person, that they're letting this other person off the hook for the bad behavior that person is engaged in. And that's not why you feel compassion and forgiveness. It's something you do for yourself so that you don't hold on to this and you can move on without this baggage. As long as you are expecting this other person to behave in a way they are capable, you know, manifestly capable, not capable of behaving like, then you are a prisoner to them. And no one should live as a prisoner to a bully's behavior. So compassion is something we do for ourselves. It is a frame of mind that helps us not be a victim of the bully. Even if the bully is targeting us, that doesn't mean we have to act like a victim or accept it. All right. And if you're looking at the other person as a flawed individual who deserves your compassion, they are not going to want to bully you. Like, no bully wants to bully someone who is not afraid of them. No bully wants to bully someone who is actively saying, oh, I'm so sorry you behaved this way. Like, if that was your response every time someone said something mean to you, they would very quickly leave you, because what a bully's looking for, the main reward a bully gets, is that it's giving them control over other people through the fear. And if you're not afraid of them because you're feeling compassion, you automatically are less of a target to them. And again, even if they do try to hurt your feelings or to manipulate you, your compassion for them inoculates you against the manipulation, because you see through it now, and you're seeing them in a way that doesn't work for the bully, but works tremendously for you. So I'm always shocked when people resist this concept of compassion, because to me, the most powerful people on the planet are the people who are compassionate and know how to wield their compassion. Robert Ingersoll has a speech he gave once where he talks about wielding compassion like a sword. This is a tool, and people think it makes us weak. No. This is one of the most powerful tools in the human emotional toolkit. And we should be thinking, like, if you find yourself, the next time you find yourself in a difficult situation, maybe you're in a store and the person in front of you is frustrating you, or they're being mean, or someone's not wearing a mask. Compassion. You don't know what's going on with this person. Maybe they can't afford a mask. You don't know their background, so don't assume you do. And calm yourself down by feeling compassion for them, and you will get through this with your dignity intact. So let's move on to the science. Operant Conditioning 101. How many of you took psychology in college? Okay, so a lot of people. You probably were exposed to this at some point. You probably had a short unit on B.F. Skinner and behavioral psychology, and then you moved on to the humanistic psychologists like Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers and people like that. Operant conditioning comes from behavioralism. And I get this question a lot. You're a humanist, why are you teaching behavioral psychology? And the answer is because there's no conflict between the two anymore, right? This behavioral psychology, operant conditioning, is considered established science. We have over 70 years of research on how behaviors are shaped and learned and unlearned. And there are no counterexamples in the literature at all. That's astonishing. Right? This is established in the same way evolution is established. It's something we know how it works and we can manipulate it. So how do we use this to stop bullying? Well, there's a technique in operant conditioning called extinguishing a behavior. If you type in operant conditioning, extinguishing a behavior, you'll probably get a few 100,000 research papers, all of them basically saying the same thing. That is a picture of me with my dolphin, not my dolphin, but a dolphin called Hiapo, and this is how I learned this stuff. I was apprenticed in these skills as a dolphin trainer. How do you shape behavior? How do you create new behavior? And how do you get unwanted behavior to stop? So this is where this all comes from. So there's basically 5 levers that you can press that will shape behavior. The first 3 have to do with your response. And that's why I was just talking about compassion. If there's a stimulus and there's a response, that response tells the animal whether it was good or bad or eh. All right, so there's a positive reinforcement, a negative reinforcement, or a neutral response. Positive reinforcement is like if you have ice cream and it tastes good, you're gonna want more ice cream, right? Negative reinforcement is a little bit more tricky. Now, the first time I ever had a hot dog, I got sick and threw up, and I have literally never had another hot dog since. The smell of a hot dog makes me nauseous. That is the power of negative reinforcement on the first 1 or 2 instances of the stimulus. After that, if the behavior is already established as positively reinforced, a negative reinforcement is actually going to act as a further reinforcement. And this is very counterintuitive, right? Because you think negative punishment, that would make the animal want to stop, but it actually escalates the behavior quite a bit, and there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. But let me give you a quick example. I already mentioned I like ice cream. When I was in China in college, ice cream was sometimes good and sometimes bad. Sometimes we got really good ice cream, and sometimes we got, you cannot believe how bad ice cream couldn't possibly be this bad, but it's that bad. All right. And what happened to us as a group is we became obsessed with ice cream. And when I say obsessed with ice cream, I mean, they would drop us off someplace cool, like a historical site, and we would immediately go down the street and find an ice cream vendor to buy ice cream from, because we could care less. We were on a mission to find ice cream. It was obsessive, and it was obsessive precisely because we were getting negative reinforcement. Negative reinforcement is still reinforcement. The way to get an unwanted behavior to stop is actually a neutral response. It's neither good nor bad. So the question becomes, how do we use this, right? So the first thing you need to know is if you want to get an unwanted behavior to stop, like bullying, you have to not reinforce it at all. Negative reinforcement is reinforcement. Positive reinforcement is reinforcement. The only surefire way to make it stop is to remove the reward entirely. The next two things you need to know have to do with schedules of responses. How often do these responses occur? And you only really have two options. You either consistently respond to something or you don't consistently respond to something, in which case you are variably responding. Variable response strengthens behavior. So if sometimes you give the bully what they want and sometimes you don't, you are strengthening bullying behavior. The only way to get the bully to be less interested is to provide 100% consistent response. Now, if you think back on your own experiences with childhood bullies or your kids' experiences with bullies, variable response is the way most humans respond to bullying situations. We try all sorts of different things in the face of a bully to get them to stop, and all that happens is they bully us more, right? Well, that's actually predicted using operant conditioning. That's not a mystery to anybody who knows behavioral conditioning, all right? So if we want bullying to stop, we have to remove the reward. That is not a punishment. And we have to remove the reward consistently. This is the methodology we use to get unwanted behavior to stop. So let's talk about what that looks like in real life, because that's just the start of it. If you had an animal or a child doing something you don't want and you remove the reward from them, the first thing that animal or child is going to do is try to get the reward back, right? So let's imagine you had a rat in a cage and they had a lever that they could push. And every time they push that lever, you know, a nut comes out or something they like. And then one day that lever doesn't work. The reward's gone. Does the rat just give up and go, oh, it's broken? Of course not, right? The rat's going to push that lever more and try to get the reward back. What the removal of the reward does is it starts the extinction process. It does not complete it. This is a process that takes place out over time. What you want your little rat to learn is it doesn't matter how often they press this lever, they're not getting their reward. And eventually, that's what makes them stop. Now, we are not rats in a cage and we are not broken levers. And our bully is going to needle us and try to get us to give them the reward back. For them, it's usually a sign of submission of some sort. They are doing this to show that they can control other people, and they're scaring you so that you do what they want. And when you stop, they ramp it up to try and intimidate you into giving them the reward back. And that's why kids kind of, I tried it, you know, ignore them and it goes away, doesn't work. They ignore the bully gets worse, exactly as predicted in the behavioral model. And then the kid comes back and it didn't work and I'm going to just scream at the bully instead. And that's what creates that variable cycle. We have to start telling kids, I want you to not ignore them, but to remove their reward. And this is going to cause them to get worse for a little bit, but that means they didn't like what you did, so do it more. Right? That's a very different thing than telling kids ignore them and they'll go away. Right? They're both trying to get to the same thing, but one is scientifically accurate. The other one is an approximation for what we want the kids to do, which is to remove the reward consistently over time and to actually increase the cost of the bullying behavior. Right? So how do we get bullying to stop? Remove the reward, increase the cost, maybe report them. I tell kids if they've got a verbal situation going on that they should look the bully in the eye if they can, or at their ear if they have or at their hair if they've got a neurological issue that makes eye contact uncomfortable, and just stand their ground and say, you know, if the bully says, oh, you know, you're stinky. Thank you for that information. It's helpful. A really calm, neutral voice with eye contact. You do that a couple of times and the bully will disengage. Anytime you can get that bully to disengage, you just won that dynamic and the next time they're going to try and they're going to do it less and less. It doesn't take very long in the very early stages. If they're threatening you, you tell them point blank, if you do that, I will report you. This is not a threat. You are not begging them to stop. You are telling them a fact. If you do this, I will report you. And if they do it, you report them. Right? And you try to make eye contact if you can. And the key to this is something they call the black rock technique, where you pretend you're a rock with no emotions. Because the emotions is what the bully's looking for. They want you to be afraid. They want you to be nervous. They want you to be scared. They want some sort of emotional response from you. You don't give them that, and you don't back down, and you don't give them what they want, but you don't attack them either. You just don't give them what they want in a calm, neutral way. And this is why that compassion and dignity and thinking of the bully compassionately is so important, is because it helps you be in the right frame of mind to actually do this. All right. If there's already physical violence and you remove their reward, it will be more physical violence, because wherever they are and you remove their reward, they're going to escalate to get their reward back. So if this is a physically violent situation already, we're not talking about bullying anymore. We're talking about battery now. And any decision on how you proceed should be based on how to keep the bully away from the victim so that they can't beat them up anymore. Because there's no way to get to the extinction except to remove the bully's ability to access the victim. And often what schools do is they isolate the victim to protect them. And what they should be doing is isolating the bully, because the victim is not the bully's only victim, right? So this is what we're talking about. This is what we need to start teaching, is this science. And it needs to kind of be tailored for each of the people that deal with this. This works in the workplace as well as it does with kids. I teach it to adults as well. And, you know, there you go. So any questions, I guess. And if you guys can moderate the question, I'm going to stop sharing the screen. And